Hello, everybody. My guest today is Bibartak Mandal, who has about 3 decades of vast and strong experience covering steel and IT industries, and covering deep and diverse areas. Now, he's a 1986 batch pass out from IIT KGP. Welcome, Bibartak Da. Thanks for agreeing to do this session with me.
Thank you very much. It's an opportunity for me to really, share my thoughts.
It's a
So thank
pleasure
you for that.
speaking with you, Bibartak Da. So let's get started. In your experience, what is the role of project management in various kinds of industries, and how does it impact organizational effectiveness?
Okay, good. So I will start with the, definition of project because, that's very important to understand what is project, right?
Right.
Because it is little away from the normal work we do, right? So if you really see the project, what is project? Project is basically time bound, right? So it has to be finished within a specific time, right? And there is a budget, so therefore you have to finish within the budget itself. So therefore the cost is extremely important. And the other, the third point is whatever you have thought of in terms of your vision that, this project will do this, right? So therefore, that must be achieved. Now, if these three things are achieved, then within that limited time, within that limited cost, and within the specific set of requirements, we call it project, right? So project is therefore certainly it's little bit different from the normal work we do every day. Now, a very specific work we do on even on everyday basis, we can possibly call it as project, but that's possibly a different definition we can talk about later. But so that is project. So looking at this, and then we need to understand the industry, right? So if I look at from the project management perspective, project organization perspective, to me there are three kind of industry. Okay. So one kind of industry is basically the industry which are core industry, large industries. They do not have a project organization as such. They have administrative um, organizations, they have functional organizations, and they have different units of operation, and there they have a specific set of hierarchies. So that's how possibly that operation runs the way it is in a manufacturing industry, or maybe any other aviation industry or automobile industry. They have their own structure.
So, would
Now,
you call an operational run for a certain period of time a project in that case? Because for them, it's ongoing operations, like right, it's like steel
it is
manufacturing, for
ongoing
example.
operation.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's not actually project, right? So if it is an ongoing kind of operation, it's not project. So then what is project in those organizations, right? In those organizations, projects are a specific set of requirement which is come up new, or they have gone for modernization or expansion, and then a new facilities which are coming up, that will be treated as project. Okay.
Okay.
Now, so let us understand that. So from industry wide, they are actually a kind of, this is a normal industry we talk about, right? On the other hand, if you really look at the engineering industries, right, those who kind of give you a solution, turnkey solutions, turnkey implementations, including the service industries like software, IT. It may maybe IT may not be IT. It may be the other service industries. They will possibly connect to you and possibly work along with you to satisfy those requirements those organizations have, right? That large organizations. Now, there you need to have possibly a time bound, cost bound, requirement bound activities to be done with the help of externals like IT organizations or maybe other service industries. Now, these service industries and the IT industries are primarily a project organization. Even a product company in the IT space, they have a good amount of project organization because the product itself will be treated as a large project within their kind of setup. There is a third kind of industry, which is the mix. The mix in the sense that they have engineering wings and they have their normal operational wings and the functional wings, and there will be projects, and there will be project organization. Basically, if you really look at project organization, is a matrix organization. Okay, so there are huge number of cross-functional teams because a project has to handle lot of things, right? And every aspect has to be kind of addressed to, and therefore there is a cross-functional team. So what in those industries they do is basically take different people from the organizational setup, as well as the that particular project organization within a big organization itself has a structure, and therefore they create a project which has extended support structure, and then execute a particular project. So you mentioned about the nature of the project, right? Also,
Um,
yeah,
the role of project
right?
management in various kinds of industries. So I think you
Correct.
pretty much
So
summarize the kind of projects there are in various industries.
yeah, but I mean, this is not all for the kind of projects. So we need to kind of understand, because I think this is specifically for software project management, but we need to understand that what is the difference between other projects and software
Right.
projects,
Right.
right? I give you some example, okay, so that I mean, it is very clear that what is the kind of projects we are talking about. I was in Tata Steel for quite a long time, as you know, and I was part of the modernization group for about 4 years. I had been specifically taken for expansion of 1 million ton facility in Jamshedpur, um, and which means that I have been pulled from the actual operations, right, and then into the project team. As I said, that there is a third kind, which is basically project plus this mix, right? So um, let me just give you the size of the project. The size of the project is around 2100, which is 2,100 crores. So it's a large project.
So
Um,
how do you define size of the project? Now, is it the revenue that is expected out of it, or uh, the cost you're putting into the whole op- if the project is seen as a separate entity, what is the cost it is going to incur over the period of the project? Is that what you call the size?
See, there are some thumb rules. Okay,
Hmm.
the thumb rules everywhere in the engineering industry as well as in the software industry also. But the point is, there has to be a specific estimation, right? So I will possibly touch upon estimation sometime afterwards, maybe in the discussions.
Sure.
But right now, I do not like to bring that estimation because it's a big subject. I do not like to get into that. But the point is, the size here, what I'm talking about is there are two different operational facilities which is coming up, and the thumb rule, if you go by thumb rule, there is a cost, and which is in the order of, at that time I'm talking about, um, is around kind of 700 million to 1 billion. Okay, now but um, what happened is, we bought actually not installed plant from Portugal. Okay, which means that everything is new, and in packing condition, they have not installed it. We bought everything, right? So therefore, thereby, the cost of the project actually came down. So that is why I do not like to, kind of talk about the cost of the project. It is also the opportunity cost, right? So therefore, let's talk about the size of the project, right? So if you really look at the size of that particular project, it's 1 million ton additional steel production,
Okay.
and semi-finished capacity. And that itself talks about 1 million ton in thumb rule, in steel terms, is $1 billion. Okay.
Okay.
So therefore, it's capable of generating $1 billion from there. So
Okay.
you have to possibly go by that. Okay. So therefore, so that is the size of the project I'm talking about. So that's in the core industry. On the other hand, if you really see in softwares, normally you do not see such large projects, right? You see much smaller projects, maybe to the extent of a single project, maybe 10 million, 15 million at the most. But as an account, possibly, it grows more than 100 million a year.
Yeah, unless
Um,
these are what we call maintenance projects, which are more like ongoing operations, but they're long duration projects where you are, say, supporting IT for a customer, for
correct,
example, over a 5-year
correct.
period. That may be a $1 billion contract. Uh, and when software engineers work on such projects, they do call it project, but it's not necessarily from beginning to end, right? It's an ongoing operational support for a customer.
Correct, correct. So we call it, but I mean, we'll come into a very specific example, possibly for the software project. What I had seen software project, which is a project as such, a project.
Mm.
One single project is possibly with a customer side cost, maybe around 30 million. Uh, our portion of cost was about 10 million. So that was the largest project I handled in my career as a single project. Okay. A single project, 10 million USD is not a joke. So we'll get back to that. But there's a basic difference between these projects. What we need to understand, because the 60% of the cost, or 60 to 70% of the cost in the normal engineering projects, the cost is the equipment cost. Okay, so rest maybe 15 to 20% is your resource cost. Okay. And then there are other government, these that there are a lot of things which is transport is also pretty huge cost in terms of those engineering projects. There, if you really look at those projects, the size are really mammoth. Okay, so huge size. And the second thing is, many agencies are talking about working on this at the same place. There are people who are working in electrics, instrumentation, level 1 automation, level 2 automation, level 3 automation, mechanical, utilities, government agencies. You have legal because you are occupying a space. Um, Huge amount of, you are actually also dealing with the goons, local politicians, local people, because there are environment problem. So huge amount of interfaces and a different kind of interfaces. I just give you one example, very simple example, and that will tell you that what is the complexity of those projects. As a part of that project, there was a steel car which has to be bought from Germany. This is called Schwerle car, because that car will transport 250 ton of steel from one shop to another shop. Okay, it's a car, 40 wheel, solid tire wheel car, and the car cost 7 crores at that time.
Okay.
Okay, um, this has to be bought and brought into the shop in single piece, and the size of that particular car is so huge. When it actually landed, because since I was from Calcutta, I was also given a responsibility that he will handle the dock. Okay, so I went to the port. We arranged a trailer. On the trailer, that car was loaded, and then when we came out, because we also knew the size of that particular car, right? And from Calcutta to Jamshedpur, all the islands you see, where that huge size trailer cannot take a turn, we had to cut all those islands and rebuild when the car passes. But we did not anticipate that it will not cross the Calcutta port gate. So they had a heritage gate, Calcutta Port Heritage Gate, and we had to actually demolish that. And you know the challenges with dealing with the government and this kind of agencies, right? So therefore, everywhere you are taking that car from Calcutta to Jamshedpur, you are there is a team who is cutting off all those things. The car is moving, and there is a team behind who is actually fixing it. Be it road, be it island, be it lamppost, be it electric supply, be it local people, and all this stuff. You can understand the complexities of this project. So the software project, we don't see those. Okay. And the
Yeah.
software projects complexities are, we'll possibly touch upon different kind of complexities, but it is primarily to deal with human being, right? And possibly the technology stuff. So less Jamela, right? So it is, you can possibly anticipate many things, but software project as such, the sizing of the project is extremely important, which is somewhat very abstract. In engineering projects, you have basically opportunity to visualize, see things, and then you have the dimension in mind, money in mind. So there are a lot of things which you can visualize. But in software projects, if you are doing a wrong estimation, you are gone. And this is the case most of the time. And that's a huge challenge for project management.
Yeah,
So we'll
interesting.
touch upon that.
Yeah, interesting you brought that up because I was reading a book the other day called Mythical Man Month, and
Hmm.
it touches upon the fact that most of the time when we estimate for software projects, we estimate in terms of man months, right? We assume that one person working or 10 people working parallelly, it should take this many man months for the project to complete. And most of the time what we miss, and why most of those estimates don't turn out to be accurate in practical terms, when which we notice later on, is that we don't account for the fact that people are not working in silos. They communicate, they collaborate, and that's where a lot of friction happens, a lot of slippages happen, uh, and then we tend to plan again. We tend to manage the estimates and work out within the schedule somehow. So that's an interesting aspect of working with people and estimating the way we do. But we'll talk about that
Project
about
manager,
itself.
yeah, I agree. Project manager, one of the primary responsibilities to talk to people, get to know what's happening. And that goes 60% of the energy actually is consumed on that one. Because you need
Hmm.
to know what is happening. And at the ground realities, it's not that, you are hearing from people and, kind of understand. Uh, you need to really sense it yourself that what's happening.
Right.
So anyway, we can possibly, okay, so let's get into, next set of discussion. So this is about project.
Yeah. So you tell me about the similarities you see in project management in steel manufacturing and in software development. What can we learn from steel manufacturing when we are actually trying to manage software projects?
Okay. I will not say, I will not put it as steel, okay, but I will put it
Mm,
as in today's world, you see, in software, there may be three, four different kind of projects. Okay. Now, primarily, predominantly, let's say, then there are two different kind of projects. One is a domain-centric project, right? So, where you need to understand this project is happening in which functional field, right? Is it cutting across different functionalities of the business operation? Um, this kind of stuff. And the other is very technology oriented research works. Okay. That is also project. Now, if it is a kind of, technology related, then possibly if you have certain goal in mind, because primarily what happens in those kind of projects are basically you have certain things which you do not know what is to achieve. You have something that this is what possibly you have to achieve at the end of the day, but the path is not kind of fixed, right? So therefore you go ahead, research, you have your technical input, and then again you start working within a stipulated time itself, so there you are still kind of time pressed and cost pressed, but you work towards technology solutions where not much of interface from many different agencies are required, but the technology people across the world. On the other hand, if you really go for domain centric kind of projects, um, you need to have a lot of understanding of the domain, the people's expectations. Very simple thing. Like, I mean, this is my early life in software. Okay. I I left Tisco in 99 second half. Okay. And then joined NIT Technologies. So my first project, because I actually joined as project management cadre. So my first project was in LIC. Okay. Um, so a very simple thing. The simple thing is there is a button, in one of those screens, because their portal and other things we had developed long back. I mean, it was part of that is basically migration. So my point is, during the time, uh, there is a bunch of juniors, right? Now they are not exposed to industry anytime. The technologically good. So this is why make a lot of difference between people. There was one boy who was technologically very sharp, and there was one girl who was a kind of always she used to try to understand that what the user will behave, and what is the expectation from that user if I am making a screen. So in one of the screen there was there are a set of buttons. Okay, now we need to understand that whether it should be left aligned somewhere, or we should be somewhere on the top, or a particular button will be distributed on the screen. It depends on what the user is expecting, right? It's not your expectation that what you think is good.
Hmm.
So this guy, the boy, actually did everything based on what he thought, right? And it was a mess because um, um, mess because the user never wanted it, right? That way. Now the same thing given to the girl when the feedback came that this is not user friendly. That girl took over. She did exactly what possibly user expected. So she spoke to them. She spoke to me as well as the other seniors that this is how what should be best under this situation. And then she laid out that particular screen, and that went through. Now, see, this is where the point is. This is where the difference is. This is where the similarity is also, because the large projects, right? The plants, the owner, the management will have some expectations, and that expectation is sometimes will not be told to you, right? That expectations are sometimes um, is hidden, right? And you need to also see from the perspective that if I am putting two plants, one after another, or two facilities one after another, not just now, what can happen 10 years hence? Because if I don't take care of that, this becomes a bottleneck afterwards. One simple example, okay, one simple example is in that facility, modernization facility, when we were building that particular plant, before we had done this, the finishing facility of 1 million ton, which is a hot strip, that came up. Okay. So that's about 2 years. I mean, before we started kind of working. Now, when we did this with this particular project, um, we just connected because there was only one single plant, right? So we connected our finishing to their input, correct? So that provision was kept, and we did that. After 4 years, when I was there, still there in that organization, the second facility like that hot strip, another facility came up. Okay, and that is also 1 million ton, and it is supposed to be fed by this same particular plant which we did. Now see the music. The music is sorry, huh?
So
um,
you said
the
music and
music.
it played. So it's
Yeah, so the music is that the the point is we you cannot um, because you need to have a transfer bay, right? So material will go there, then it will be distributed either this side or that side. And you know what is the cost of that? There is a 40 meter by around 40-meter depth inside the ground. There are concrete chunks, 40-meter wide and 40-meter deep, right? Concrete chunks and about 50-60 meters long. This chunk, we had only 7 days of shutdown. In this period, this chunk has to be cut, taken out, and the entire transfer bay connecting both the plants needs to be again rebuilt. 7 days. And you can imagine 40 meter by 60 meter by 40 meter concrete chunks has to be cut out from 40-meter deep underground. How can you do that? So this is a project itself, and people from all over the India, industrial people, they came to see it because we had used one of the technology which is available in Sweden. Okay, so they cut it with diamond rings. Okay, so black diamond chains are actually inserted through those concrete, and then they just sliced it in 1.5 day. That concrete chunk was completely removed from that place. It was amazing to see how things can be done. So this is what is project, and this is the difference. Is this at the same time? This is also a similarity because in software projects, such kind of your thought process has to go beyond and see that it's not just immediate requirement. I need to see that this is going to run for 10 more years,
but
15 more years.
but picking that LIC example again, would it have been more efficient if it was defined beforehand in specification terms exactly how the screen should have looked like, and then given to the engineers to develop?
Correct,
Or is there
correct.
merit in letting them be creative?
No, no, yeah, correct. So what is really done is you do that also. That you basically take static screens and then you do it. See, it's a normally a gap from both sides. Project has a lot of gaps. Okay, in during the executions, this is a gap from both sides. So let's say I give a set of 50 screens to customer. If it is a Japanese customer, they will kind of they will go every detail. Even they will measure with the scale. Okay, and then they will see whether pixel 1 should go up or go right or something like that. If you go to give it to Indian vendors, Indian customers, uh, they will acknowledge that you have given it. That's it. So this is where the problem is. The problem is there are gaps, and also you cannot possibly visualize all the screen during the project initiation, right? So you have taken requirements, but what happens is maybe during your execution you see that okay, um, this particular functionality, if I break into 3 screens, it would be good instead of one. Otherwise, it is becoming clumsy, and possibly going back and forth is becoming too much, because otherwise we have to come back, right? So the state is there. There is a state machine, right, in every place. So the state machine is possibly so complex out there, um, is not good, and it should be broken. So everything cannot be kind of gauged right at the beginning.
Okay.
But yes, as you go forward, they will kind of explored and discussed and possibly fixed.
I would presume like when you start, you have some base which you create and have your team work on that as the goal, and then as you go along, you would improve on that. And if you figure out there is a better way of doing it, then you would alter the specifications accordingly, right?
You see, it depends. It depends in the sense that in many different kind of projects, a detailed specification may not be possible right from the beginning.
Okay.
Okay, it is the nature of the project. Um, in many other projects, especially the projects which are development projects, development projects is where you have to actually develop a functionality or enhance a functionality afresh, right? So there possibly you can go into detail, because there are a lot of things which you need to yourself visualize, and that also should be kind of taken forward with the clients, because otherwise there will be lots of them, right? So there the specification possibly is more complete.
Okay.
Now there are other kind of projects like you may have heard of, right, when you were in Wipro, that there was a project which is with ArcelorMittal on the MES
Yeah. Yeah.
manufacturing execution system. In those kind of projects, it's a primarily uh, I'll call it a system integration project.
Hmm.
Now in see, this is a very large project, extremely large project for an organization. Um, they have about 700 odd applications, and in those 700 odd applications, about 250 applications impacted because of certain things which we were doing, right? And out of that, about 180 applications undergone complete modification, right? And about 6 applications which are completely new, which came up, right? Now, really making a specification for such kind of mammoth work from the first day itself is not possible. Now, in such case, uh, what do you do? How do you go about it? The first thing, how do you estimate really, such projects? Um, I can only tell you, it is only the experienced people can, estimate. And I am not saying that people experienced in the sense that um, experienced in the software field. That person must have a very solid domain experience. Otherwise, he or she cannot understand the functional interfaces between different business entities, because it is enterprise level impact. For the team, for the students, what is enterprise level? Enterprise level is basically the entire business gamut that particular organization is going through, and behind that there is a supporting systems, all the systems supporting the different parts of the business, be it core manufacturing, be it the sales, be it the after sales, and be it the procurement and everything. Everything gets impacted. Now, in such a case, uh, the first job for you is to understand that if at all a particular functionality is being impacted, right? So if you can do that, possibly that's good enough to start with, because you don't know what is exactly the impact. And then possibly when you doing a functional interaction between two particular specific applications, when you are trying to kind of design it, then you will understand that, okay, this is what exactly is going to change. Not within these two application itself, but there is an influence of the applications around, right? Because by that time you know that there are things which are changing in those applications also, right?
Right.
So therefore it is a very complex, very very complex area. And then um, I was fortunate because I had background, and so I understood. I actually did the whiteboarding with the customer, that these are the things which will be getting impacted. This is how the information should flow. We actually created information flow. That this is how the entire information should flow from here to there to there, right? So whether it should come back to level 2 to level 1 to level 3 automation, how the information should move, different kind of information. So that's the first part, right? And the second is um, the complexity, the execution on the other hand for this kind of project is completely installation driven. You know why?
Mm.
Because this is a 30-month project, and after 30 months we'll get 7 days of shutdown. 7 days. In these 7 days, all these 200 odd applications had to come back to the system with the new avatar, and they will be alive, and they have to function the way it is expected out of this particular project without hampering the old thing which is already been happened. Because it's a plant, right? Running plant. So there are
Mm.
stocks, there are so many things, right? The finished products. So you have to take account of everything, right? Every piece of material you have to track. So 7 days. And 7 days, if you miss, you have to wait for another 1 year to
Mm.
get that 7 days. And if we delay by 2 days, about 30 million is wiped out.
Oh.
Okay. So
Mm.
therefore, the whole project which we are doing with the customer, we and then the other vendors rather, because it's a multi-vendor project, but we were kind of controlling everything because we are the prime vendor. Everything will be wiped out. Can you imagine the kind of complexity of that particular project? So therefore, everything had to be planned from the day one based on the entire installation process.
Mm.
So our strategy, the entire installation strategy, the new application, it's an approach, right? So whether we should go by big bang approach or by piece by piece approach. So the entire strategy been worked out by me, okay, for that specifically,
Okay.
and we went for big bang approach, okay. But every piece of the strategy, that this is how the first thing should be moved here, and this application has to go now, and then that application has to go in kind of in a sequence, because the data will also move, right, the moment the application is on run, and therefore some applications will stop if there is no data and start generating faulty data in the
Mm.
system, which you cannot allow, right? So when you are doing that, very frankly speaking, it is not software development. Okay, you cannot imagine or extend this with your uh, software development skills. This is
Mm.
completely industry skills, because I had to work on their stocks. Every between two plants, there is always a stock yard where the material is semi finished products are dumped,
Mm.
right? Now when you are basically finishing your material before the shutdown, there has to be some stock, right? And also when you are starting off, you have to have the right kind of stock so that you can start actually the next activities with the new applications, right? And your target trial pieces has to be ready,
Hmm.
right? So you had to plan everything really. I mean, therefore every strategy of the stock, how much stock has to be maintained, and these are all audited values, right, for them, because it has to be audited. So much
Hmm.
of tonnage and is that another thing. And after the system is kind of all in, the same auditing function has to again work and show that I have not lost every piece anywhere, and my
Right.
tonnage is absolutely same everywhere. So this is a humongous stuff. I mean, you cannot think it in terms of just software. Just software you
Hmm.
cannot think. And this is how for them I mean they were the steel experts, right? But they used to call me he's the expert, right? So yeah, but the point is, it is all because I had experience in steel, and I I commissioned certain plant in steel, and I knew what is iron making, steel making, finishing, and I had the complete exposure and entire the material flow and all the stuff. So I therefore had in mind that where things can go wrong,
Hmm.
right? And therefore that has been addressed. So some of the software project. Oh, okay. So
Hmm.
this is a good point, and this is extremely good point, because this is also true for SAP implementation. Because SAP implementation is not just SAP implementation. Okay, you need to understand that the business process changes when you do SAP implementation, because the way you are doing business functions, that has to change, because the system only allows you to do perform certain things in a separate way, different than what you are doing. So therefore you need to change. Now this is called change management. This is not software change management, where if there is a
Hmm.
small change happened, then you have to log it somewhere so that the change is not lost and it is accounted for. This is not that change. This is organization and business change management. Okay, so business change management was also a part of it, and we were responsible for it. So therefore, who should be trained, when should be trained, what should be trained, from operational staff to the business functional staff to the corporates. Everything was done by us.
Hmm.
So this is a big chapter, I mean, so such projects, really the complexities you cannot work out right at the beginning. We were fortunate possibly that um, I could estimate within maybe 15%, 10-15% this side, that side. I could do it. We had a lot of overshot in terms of the requirements also, which we kind of captured, contested, got 50% of the money, because you will not be able to realize that when I asked some of these big shots in Wipro that time, that um, should we not kind of get those money back from customer, because uh, we are supposed to get that. So the answer was, if you have achieved 50% of that, whatever you could log, I think that is good enough. Industry standard is actually below 50%. So I said, this was an experience, right? This was also an experience for me, because such exposure was not there. So project management, you will get a lot of exposure, different sides. You have to keep yourself open. You have to kind of get those inputs, and start assimilating those, and
Hmm.
make your own judgment that what you need to do under a situation.
Okay, another, I think,
Estimation.
hmm,
Yeah.
I think I also
Going on.
another takeaway from that is while there is a lot of learning as you manage projects, it's also very useful and actually imperative that you equip yourself with the necessary technology and domain skills to a reasonable level of depth, so that you're able to
Absolutely.
actually manage the project in the way it should.
Absolutely. There is no shortcut. You have to.
Right,
You have to.
right.
There is no way out, because there are large projects, especially. And I'm assuming that the students here will possibly at some point of time they will handle large projects. The large projects certainly need a lot of understanding about the project and the environment around the project. It's extremely important. Otherwise, most of the things will be missed.
Hmm.
And a very small thing may create problem, huge problem.
Right. Right. So, Bibartak, how do you typically estimate and plan?
This is, you are talking about software projects, right?
Yeah, and if there is anything, any parallels with your experience in the steel industry, that will also help. But from the context of
Uh,
software projects, especially.
yeah, correct. So, I mean, engineering projects estimation is pretty different, rather, completely different from software project estimation. Now, let me talk more on software project estimation. Possibly that would be possibly good for the
Right.
students. Although there are established processes for estimation, um, unfortunately, very few organizations follow estimation process, or rather, I will say that they have their own mechanism to estimate, and different groups within the organization possibly follow different things. Now, what does that mean, really? So let's talk about established processes, and then what happens in reality. Okay. So first, I will touch upon that. How do you go about a standard? I will rather, kind of very formal estimation process. There are many estimation process which is kind of available today. The earlier days, if you really see, even why should I say earlier days? Actually, now even now you have mix of legacy applications as well as the modern object-oriented applications. Now, obviously, the system or the process which will be followed for legacy applications will not be same as the new technology space, right? Because now you do not need to really go deep into your technology stuff uh, to, because in our days it used to be how do you kind of manipulate memories to write a program, or kind of make one application, because the memory was very kind of, and there was a huge technical challenge out there. So therefore, if you can write some program in less number of lines which does the right work, that's possibly the best. That has changed, right? Now nobody bothers about usage of memory, memory leakage. Leakage bothers possibly when only the application gives pain, but otherwise, no one is really bothered today. I mean, drag and drop, do something, and code something in a block, and then in the program is ready for you. So you have IDs now. So the way you estimate within an ID is pretty different from the other things. But when we say that there is established process about estimation, um, there are different models. There are COCOMO models. There are function point analysis models. There are work breakdown structure kind of stuff. There are Delphi model. Um, there are few other established models. But we need to understand as a kind of project manager that which kind of stuff is really applicable, because that is kind of important. Now, we talked about at length about a project, right? And that was a system integration project. Now, if you really look at in that particular space, there are 21 different technologies, 14 different technology platforms. Now, you can understand that there, just one particular specific technique doesn't help, right? So what is going to help is your domain knowledge, business integration, your visualization of complexities of the problem, and then that translates into the code. What could be the code behind it, right? And that particular estimation. So some kind of one third of that may be legacy applications, where number of lines of code is extremely important, because that's how within the COCOMO model also you actually calculate that. Maybe at once upon a time it was 128 lines of code of mainframe used to be equivalent to kind of one function point. Later on, it becomes 107 kind of lines of code. Now, in assembly language, which is even kind of more granular than mainframe, uh, COBOL or something like that, um, there possibly there is a different lines of code, which is a standard, right? But ultimately, in your mind, you have to translate whatever input coming following a framework and do that calculation. It is not just so much of lines of code doing so much of things, right? On the function point, it is basically more in terms of your understanding of the functions, and they have a very defined process that what is function, what is entity, what is output, what is views, all those kind of stuff. What is they call it, what is that, internal logical points. um, you need to understand those specification, that what it means. But the point is, even to break one functionality into those different parts, you need to really have good understanding of the functional space, and then only you can do it.
Mm.
For instance, for a small organization, HR application, which is human resource application, maybe 35 to 40 months if you develop a fresh. But if you take it to the same kind of application, to a large application, maybe like Toyota, and that too not the whole stuff, maybe some part of HR, will be more than 100 months.
Mm.
So because you need to understand the complexities. For small organizations, I will not say small organizations, I will say rather, less complex application organizations. Because, I mean, most of these large organizations, corporates, even the labors, right, the wage category and non-wage categories, there are so many things where you have applications of bonus, where you do not have, where overtime is there, where overtime is not there. All these are kind of, complexities. And all these has to be recorded separately. So the input is different, structure is different for them. And
Mm.
that's how the complexities is different, right? So one need to really understand that. That part has to be understood very, very clearly, that what is behind those functionalities, not just that functionality. Correct.
Mm.
So because that the complexity will define what is the size of that particular product,
So
right?
conceptually,
So
we
when you do that,
sorry. So conceptually, we have these functionalities, and we need to have a thorough assessment of the complexity of those functionalities. And those translate, I'm just trying to put it in a flow. Those translate to certain specifications which need to be developed, and that we need to understand what
no,
kind
no,
of.
no, no. So there is a specification given by these standards, that FP or COCOMO
Hmm.
model, or those. So basically, your understanding has to be translated into those first. Okay,
Right.
and that will give you some estimation.
So that will give you the effort and all the resources that we will need to based on those
That will give
guidelines?
you
Yeah.
not the resource, they will give that will give possibly the effort.
Yeah.
Again, that depends on the technology, that depends on the environment,
Mhm.
right? Because in function point analysis, about there are 32 different environmental constraints.
Hmm.
Okay. Now, if you put those, you see, I mean, it is exponential rise in terms of as the project size goes up and the complexity, sorry, rather the complexities goes up, it is almost exponential rise in terms of effort.
Hmm.
Because the complexity, some of the complexities take it to such a height that um, you can only imagine certain things at this stage, but you cannot elaborate it. So
Right.
therefore, what do we do in those areas, right? So the only way out is you have a higher complexity numbers, right? And the same applications may be 4 times higher based on that complexity.
That will add to your factors of safety so that you're actually.
It is not
Oh.
safety. It is
Hmm.
not. It is not safety. I tell you what. I mean, it is not at all safety. It is hygiene. No, it is the basic hygiene.
Hmm.
Because if you do not have a good understanding, you will certainly land up, especially in software project, you will certainly land up into a wrong estimation. And that is where the problem starts at the very beginning.
Yeah, I mean that's almost in all cases.
In all cases.
Yeah.
And if this particular project I am talking about, my estimation was, today I also remember, 18,350 man days effort. 18,350 man days effort.
Hmm.
Okay. This I had calculated and the cost was coming more than some millions.
Hmm.
Hmm. Double digit. Okay. So my point is, when I get that and then cost was getting negotiated, this is at 2 o'clock in the night, because that time US Canada was working, right? And we were in the negotiation team, right? Suresh was there and Bala was there. Two Balas and everybody was there around. Ajay and all that time was not there, right? So they were somewhere else. Okay. But the point is, that night, okay, um, there are a lot of, I'm not getting into the negotiation part. So there was pricing, rate, blah, 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 a lot of negotiation happened. It came down to single figure, a single digit figure. Okay. And then again brought down. And then at some point of time, it is become an offer, whether you take it or you don't take it. Okay. Um, and remember, this is after 1.5 years of grueling effort from me and few more folks, including Narayan Katti. I went about 8 times before that to that region to kind of do the whiteboarding with customer, and then you do not want to lose that project, right? And that kind of project is once in a blue moon for our industry, both for the software industry and again for that industry also. That industry is giving that project because nobody gives that project which actually impacts the entire enterprise applications. No one. So it is very complex. Um, so this is what Suresh asked me. How much it translates in terms of, if this is the cost we have to take the project, what is the effort, corresponding effort? So we gave a number because there is also kind of internal uh, financials, right? They will not allow us to take the project. You know that very well, right?
Hmm.
So every finance will say that beyond that you cannot take that project, right? And we are not talking about few K, right? 1,000 Ks. We're talking about difference in millions, right?
Right.
So Suresh said, so I gave some figure, and that figure is 16,670 mandates
Hmm.
instead of 18,350.
Hmm.
So Suresh said, you have to execute the project. in this particular thing. I'm going yes to it, and we are finalizing the deal.
Mm.
Okay, so even if you do a right estimation, and you know what, our project finished around 22,350 kind of uh,
Okay.
percentage,
Personally.
where um, there was uh, we had about 700K more realization than the price which has been given. Okay,
Okay.
and that translates into another 1,300. So what I'm trying to say is that my estimation was within plus minus 10-15%. Okay,
Mm.
and then there was the additional scope, and that was about 2,000 or about 3,000 more percentage. I think it's around 3,500 percentage, and we just realized 1,500 percentage of effort cost. I mean
How did
corresponding
you
cost.
plan in such a scenario? I mean, you had an estimate which had reasonable uncertainties built into it. And
Right.
then you went about executing. You first must have made a plan, and this is how we will do it with the constraints of cost, quality, and time that we need to achieve. And then your actual effort was somewhat higher, but you must have planned it all somehow. So how did
Oh
you go
yes.
about doing
So I mean, how do you go? Let's understand how do you go. Okay. So the point is, let's say you have a number in mind, right? Say X number. This is the total effort. Now there are clear cut divisions of effort in each stage of the project. Okay, it's more or less a thumb rule, and it works. Like you have 10%, 10 to 12% is in requirement study. Okay, another 12 to 15% is in design. Okay, and then coding, right? Cut, which is including the unit test, and that's around 30-35%. Okay, now this will give you around 65-70%, right? If you can do 65% is good. Okay, because for this kind of project, testing effort is huge. In fact, our more than one third effort was testing in this particular, because there are so many systems interacting with each other, and the system testing was huge. Okay, we'll touch upon it. Okay, now, so testing is normally around, let's say, 30%. Okay, 25 to 30%. Rest about 10% is your acceptance test. So these are more or less a kind of industry norms. Okay, so where if you divide that your resources, right, across this life cycle, then you know that for this much of effort I need to have so many people, and that's how you plan. And then you see that what is my technology mix, what is my functional mix. So you have to then say that, okay, I have to choose this kind of people. So therefore, as a project manager, again, it's your responsibility to really understand that, okay, it's a complex project based on the complexity of the particular project. This is the kind of profile I will take. Should I take another manager? Do I need another manager at all? Or do I need techno manager who will basically, I will expect that these guys actually work with his own hand, with his or her own hand, rather than just giving me inputs and gains. I don't possibly require that, or maybe this project doesn't require that. So that's very important to understand, and how much you can also support the team is extremely important. In this case, the entire functional domain expert was me. So anything anyone stuck up anyway, not from the technology part, but from the entire data flow, information flow perspective, no one is, they will come back to me. They will say that, what do I do in this case? So I
it?
will possibly advise not in, again, software terms. I will possibly say this is what should happen. Your application and that application, they should do this. Okay, so therefore you go ahead like that. So that's how, I mean, you have to play. Let's understand that a project manager just working outside and watching what is happening doesn't help. He has to be a kind of, he or she has to be a functional project manager.
Hmm.
And which means a heavy interaction, understand where, because see, the point is, once a mistake is done for such a large project, it is extremely hard to get it back. Extremely
Hmm.
hard. So you cannot allow anything to go wrong anytime. We did 17 times dry run of
Hmm.
testing. 17 times the entire full cycle, especially the level 2 and level 3 automation um, exchange of data. 17 times plant half day के लिए बंद है, take a trial
Hmm.
and then see where the problems. Okay. Now this is again, as I said, that it is all installation driven. So we had that thing in mind. We used to know that these are the days where we will get 6 hours, 7 hours downtime in a year, and then plan all work accordingly. That some part of my work will be actually ready to test during that time,
Hmm.
because you will never get that entire plant except those 7 days. Then what do
Hmm.
you do? And these systems are, they do not have standby systems. And these are absolutely live systems. You cannot push the garbage also there, right? Then how do you test it? So you have to plan everything. You have to plan everything, and you have to actually execute that way. So therefore there is no chance of, you cannot have a high margin of error is here extremely risky. This project will never be fulfilled. Let me also tell you, this particular project, they have tried 3 times with large vendors like IBM, Capgemini, and I think there was another vendor. So they tried 3 times and they failed, and nobody kind of dared to take that entire staff of work. Dared to take, because
Amazing.
you see the visibility is not there. You can get it right, so you don't have the visibility of what is happening. It's not only technology, it is not only software, it is how the plant is operating. You need to have that visualization.
Right.
So therefore, um, it is very tough, and a project manager has to be, estimation has to be correct, but estimation not necessarily, if it is within the 10-15% of margin, you think that plus minus 10-15%, you think that you have actually estimated very
Very well.
well. Okay, but the point is, it can go wrong. I did another, some project we had to kind of, in another, uh, in this NIT technologies, before um, I entered into a particular project. I was there in another project, but they told me that I need to be there because that project is in kind of shambles. Um, it is underestimated by 10 times.
Second time.
10 times. So the very fast interactions after the week, I said that actually this project effort should have been this. They had around 333 man-month effort for the entire project. There are 32 modules. It is almost a ERP system for a US municipality.
Hmm.
US municipality, all functions, all functions. For that, there was a legacy applications, and that legacy applications needed to export to Java. Okay. Um, most of these applications 30 years back written, nobody knows what happens into that particular application until and unless you run that application again and again and again and again and see what is the problem and what is the functionality. That kind of application, somebody did a calculation for 32 models, 333 man. The first day I said, after a week, after my thing, I said that it is more than 3,000 man month effort. So
Hmm.
people laughed. People laughed. I'm not joking. one of the vice president of NIT then laughed. He was at Delhi. So I said, "You are laughing today, but you will cry someday." And that's what happened after 6 months, because people realized that just one single module to finish took more than 65 months. So now the question is, how will you kind of the 32 modules, how will you finish? There was one single screen in their procurement. That particular procurement screen can handle 110 types of purchase orders.
Mm.
Can you imagine the kind of complexities within that particular screen? And that screen actually subsequently opens up 23 other screens. Because based on the value you give, everything changes. Everything changes. Okay. And then you can do possibly a processing of one kind of purchase orders. Now, nobody understands that. That particular procurement application, one single program, it was so complex. It was more than 1 million lines of code, COBOL code. 1 million line of COBOL code in a single program. It can be such complex application. Now, this is the kind of stuff somebody needs to understand, that for a large, the person who had kind of estimated, he never had any clue that a US municipality application could be how complex.
Mm.
He had absolutely no clue. And the customer is also, I will say that fool. Because the customer thought that, okay, I'm getting cheaper. Okay. Very
Yeah.
cheap solution. They did not realize that such a blunder they're doing.
So
Anyway, so that's how.
what is your approach to handling crisis like this? Like approach to crisis management, schedule slippages,
Yeah.
and
So,
budget
this
overruns.
particular project.
Yeah.
Right. So let's say in this particular project, it is obviously schedule overrun, effort overrun, cost overrun. All three happened,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So what do we do? I personally used to have, I had been shifted to Delhi for this particular work for 2 months to at least complete one module. Okay. Um, I used to have calls whole night actually, because it's a US client, whole night, making them, and please understand that these guys are legacy application guys, right? And then during that time, that mouse and click and other thing has just come in the market. So somebody just taking it, maybe making a tab and going into the next field, and they're expecting everything to happen without clicking. You're getting my point? JavaScript is just coming during that time. It is just introduced in the market, JavaScript.
Mm-hmm.
Because today, through JavaScript, you can actually do a lot of things. Okay. Now, it has just come into the market. And that kind of feature, without clicking mouse, how will people are lost? How to do that? Okay. Now, there is a technological challenge in one side, and there is the expectation challenge in another side, right? And the application complexity is not known. Now, under this situation, we had a huge deliberation on this with the customer. And then one of the president of Thadani, Mr. Thadani, VK Thadani. So he used to be based out of US. And I remember in one night, this is what is exactly being discussed. Because, because I ran that application so many times. Okay. And I knew every nook and corner that, where that application is the problem, right? Or what happens. Even then, I don't understand. There are many things which was happening. which I did not understand how it is happening, because I'm not getting into the code. I'm just trying to understand from the functional point of view. But there are certain things which happens within in the application part. Now, if you do not understand, you cannot also say to your guys, boss, ye jaga thoda dekho, because this looks to be dicey out here. What is that there in that code? Right? We need to flesh out that logic. So, and there is a logical thing and there is a functional thing, right? And somewhere it has to meet. The problem is it is extremely difficult to kind of marry them. If you know the technical thing and you know the functional things, then there is a good match. You can possibly translate that into a new piece of code very easily. Otherwise, it's extremely difficult. Now, in such a case, I told one day, I used to say that, this project cannot be finished in this, right? And then it was taken up with their CEO, and Thadani was there. I had been questioned in that point blank, that is there any person in your organization apart from the Bibartak with whom we can talk? So, Thadani, what he said? He said that he's the most knowledgeable as far as this particular project and these functionalities is concerned. No one in our organization can respond to you better than him. So therefore, if you have anything to say, tell him, and he will certainly make it a point to kind of implement that for you. So the obvious fate is, after some time, they had a launch date. The customer had a launch date, right? So they cannot cross it. So there are 20 million penalties. It was under the contract. So there was the out of the court settlement. This is pointed out. Huh?
Okay.
Sorry. So this was pointed out to customer. We deliberated along, and then this was a settlement outside the court. You cannot execute a project which is 10 times higher than. I had experience of 2 to 3 times higher, and we executed it. We had to, because it's a large client for us. But the point is, wrong estimation is wrong estimation,
But
and it can actually put into trouble.
in smaller slippages like 2 to 3 times, how did you handle those cases? When you actually went ahead and finished the project, uh, still there must have been
So
adverse impacts
there,
of various kinds.
see, the point is, the first thing is, um, then you are a very bad boy or a bad girl, right? Whoever is the project manager, right? Because you could not keep the budget within the kind of cost, whatever you said,
Hmm.
right? You cannot contain the project. From the customer point of view, I was expecting certain thing to happen in this time, and these functionalities must be there. Could not happen, right? So therefore, you are in a extremely tight situation from both sides, internally as well externally. And I used to remember my everyday schedule was come back home at around 3 o'clock in the night, and again go back by 9 a.m. because things will not start if I do not go, or I need to see that what is happening. And at night you have customer interactions, um, and I mean, if the project is overrun, then it is firefighting. It's fire
Hmm.
everywhere, and
Hmm.
you have to extinguish those fires. So you have to talk sense, talk logical, talk with passion, talk with intelligence, and talk with the reality. You have to do it. Um, you do not have choice. And in a way, what happens is, there are a lot of people also fired
Hmm.
inside the project organization and also at the customer end. Because the customer, there is also a larger stake, right?
Yeah.
So you have all this going on, but you have to kind of execute the project still and make it a success. So
There's so
that's
much
another
of
point.
stretching, right? The entire team needs to stretch quite a bit. So how do
Very,
you,
very strict.
yeah, so how do you manage the communication bit with your team? Because they also need to be on board that they have to now deliver this within the constraints, and a lot of investment of their own time is required beyond what
Well, of
the
course.
official hours are there.
Yes.
How do you motivate
So
your team
and
and manage that coordination and communication part?
so that is why, that is why you need to be very, very sincere. I mean, I tell you why, because none of your team member will work if you think that I'll manage the kind of project from home under this situation. You cannot.
Mm,
There are juniors, who will, because these are primarily little large team, maybe 30 odd, maybe more. Now the point is, many of them are juniors, right? And with juniors, you have to take a stock of the situation, because you also need to know that it's a reflection of what seniors are doing, right? Because if you do not take a stock of situation from the juniors, you actually, and their difficulties, because you see, the point is everybody wants to hide his or her problems, right? So so is for the team. So let's say for 30-member team, there are at least 7 8 team leads, right? Now this each team lead will have their own behavior. They have a task, and they will try and accomplish that. And if they cannot accomplish that, they will also start hiding, right?
right.
Now you need to flesh out that what is exactly happening out there. The only way to do is basically you need to. There are honest guys, and say they will come back and say that, this is the point. The point is there are many people which they will not give you commitment. That's more dangerous. Okay. Now somebody has given commitment, failed. You try to help them out is fine. Okay. You know that this is a situation. But there are people, they will not give you a commitment, even the seniors, right? They said, no, I'm doing, but I cannot tell you when it is going to finish. Now, what will you plan? So this is precisely the problem. The problem is you need to really understand then from your perspective, from the juniors, what is exactly happening. Then you start questioning. Okay, so you are saying this, then how much you have done? Then you need to know what is happening in that functionality. So how much of that functionality is done? This is done, this is done, or this is done, this is not done. Okay, fine. So you then need to understand that how much is done, how much is left, and then extrapolate based on that and have it, because you have to give a promise to your customer, isn't it?
Right.
It is not that your team member is saying no, okay, I cannot give you estimation. Doesn't mean that to your customer he will say no, sir, I will not be able to give you. No, that's not right. You have to give it. You don't have any choice out there. You have to also give answer to your management internally, because this is when the project is going to finish, or this part of this is going to finish. So this is a tricky situation, a very cumbersome situation. In one of the project, I remember I was in Belgium for during that time. I had been sent to go at the very initial phase of the project. This is again a very large project, and it's a very interesting project. Um, it was basically three different insurance companies are merging.
Okay.
Okay, non-life insurance companies, they're merging in Belgium. Now they have different products but similar products. So what we suggested to them is that we will create, and we will kind of mm, have one set of functionalities which will work um, as basically an engine for creation of insurances.
Mm,
Getting my point? So
yeah.
it's a insurance creation engine. So thought process wise is extremely good, right? So we started taking requirements, and I went actually in the very initial phase where they're taking the requirements. And then we are also parallelly start building up kind of prototype that, if I push in these things, will I be able to kind of achieve the engine which I'm looking at? So the technical team and the business team who are basically extracting information, both are at the same place. It is in Belgium. We are doing it at, it was Antwerp. So in Antwerp, we basically, carried this forward. So after a month, I observed that the flow of information has slowly came down. I said, why? So then I took it up, start taking up with the customer. And there are three companies, three general managers, I was interacting with. And they say that, okay, I have, for me to really arrive at what we need to do to merge these application or these insurance with this scheme of uh, the other party insurance,
Mm.
this is what I need to do. I have not kind of come out in that kind of conclusions. So then I said, then if you guys are still thinking that how to do that, then how do we do that? Because you are not giving me the requirements in that case. So we started this conversation. And after some days, we realized that it is not only taking or merging these the three different set of insurances. There are claims, right? And there are maturities, right? Um, until and unless each insurance policy, because in every month or every day there is a situation where policy is maturing or there is a claim or something like that, right? So until and unless this settlement is there, right? And this settlement means in a new system, right? In the new perspective, whatever policy you have done, the earlier policy has to reflect the same thing in your new policy, right?
Mm.
And then if there is a claim, settlement has to be done. If there is a maturity, this has to be done. And it cannot just happen in one day, switching over. It has to be done over time. So what is that strategy? So they just kind of, it's from heaven, I mean, there are three different companies, insurance companies. They have never thought of this, but they're trying to merge it.
Mm.
So sometimes you understand the complexities, right?
Yeah.
So they were just, fallen from heaven. They said, what do you think? We cannot otherwise merge it. I said, how will you merge it? So your
Mm.
policy number is going to change from here to there. Now, if you cannot have the same set of repository reflecting into the new policy, how will you do it? Because, I mean, your policy may change. So then how will you do it? So they started realizing the pain. Okay. Then there was a head in Europe. This is in the ING, okay, ING group. So there was one head. Uh, he used to sit in Netherlands. So I had to go to Netherlands. So he called. A very nice office with a lot of I mean they actually live in style. Those guys, big shots. Um, so he called all these folks. He started asking one by one. So what is the problem you are facing? So everybody again, it's like whatever happens at the team lead, it also happened at the general manager level.
Yeah.
It's not different. World is same. Okay. So they started kind of saying, and hiding the fact and trying to kind of bully around here and there. Okay, they are with their own points. So this guy understood, and then one by one, I was last. Then I've been asked. So we worked up. I understand that these are the things which you have brought up into, and we possibly do not have any answer to this. Okay. As far as I am concerned, I am not getting any kind of answer from the group you have heard, whoever, whatever spoken. So I don't think there is a concrete response to whatever you are asking for. So I said that, it's then what you are doing is you are trying to kind of making a table unstable, because you have four payas and then you are cutting the payas, and very soon things will be extremely unstable and it will not stand on its feet. I said you are right. That project on that particular day is closed.
Okay.
And it was a multi-million dollar project. I had to absorb lot of gali from inside. You can understand, right? So
Hmm.
what is the nature of us? Our nature of us is बस चलने दो ना, प्रोजेक्ट चलेगा, हम लोग का पैसा आएगा, तुम्हारा क्या है?
Hmm.
वो प्रोजेक्ट कैंसिल होगा तो होगा, तो क्या है, तो हम जितना तक चलेगा मेरा पैसा तो आएगा.
Right. Yeah.
I had to hear, I had to actually be, in this case, it was not Thadani with whom I had to speak to. I was in NIT during that time, but there was another vice president, uh, and I had to be questionable to him. So he called me and said that, why did you do that? I said, sir, the point is, if you are looking at a relationship and not this particular project, and ING is a large client for us, and we do not only this particular thing, we do a lot of other stuff with them.
Hmm.
So you think that we can actually uh, hinder into, or kind of earn a very bad name in terms of a vendor for the whole ING perspective? I think we cannot do that, because that particular project, I have a clear visibility that it's not going to happen.
Hmm.
So what do I say? I will say lie to customers, say that everything is good, and then what is the face I will have? Am I a project manager in that case? I'm not a project manager, because then I don't know anything what is happening in that particular project. But if you consider me as a kind of project manager for such important assignment, I have told whatever I had to say. So he said fine. They were obviously cheesed off.
Hmm.
Such a large business has gone. But the point is, sometimes it's on you. It's on you. The entire stake is on you. That what you will say,
Right.
because it's not that you should be honest. And my point is, you should be honest, because you are trying to deliver certain goods and services to your customer, and there has to be honesty associated with it. This is not cheating. That as long as you want, you can do that. You just cannot do that. And again, from your what kind of learning you have, and what kind of learning the team will have from you if you give a very wrong message. It cannot be a right kind of frame of mind, right? So because it's not that you in the organization or in an industry, you are just performing your job. When you are looking at many people, 10 times more people are looking at you, right? And see what you are doing. There are learnings you can learn from anybody and everybody in the organizations, but application is certainly on you, how you like to do it. So this is how possibly you deal with it. There are different situations.
Right. Just one more question. The kind of people you manage in a software organization versus in a company like Tata Steel, the profiles of people are very different, and I'm sure the kind of people, say blue collar versus white collar, perhaps that kind of a difference would be there. So, how does
Very
that
different.
change your approach to how you manage your teams?
Very different. I will say that in a normal core industry organization setup, um, you start with a khalasi, right? To the general manager, vice president, up to CEO is your anybody and everybody you may have to talk to. Okay, and you may have to, or they, that individual may take part in project somewhere, right? So the point is, this is a crowd. This crowd is educationally so different, behaviorally so different, because in an industry setup, the behavior is very different. वहाँ पे गाली चलता है without problems, right? And at points, that gali is okay. I mean, you do it as a part of your job.
Mm.
Um, and then the point is something which you are thinking from the intellectual point of view. You cannot just write it and pass it on to that as information, right? Because they don't know how to read, right? So then what you need to do is you need to, it is not that they are not intelligent, okay? So I am not going to challenge anybody who is at a very lower level and they have a problem with their intelligence. They're intelligent people. They have not kind of come into contact of education possibly the way we are, okay? But the point is these guys are actually skillful, they're intelligent, and if you make them understand that what needs to be done under the situation, they do it. One, a very good example, in this modernization project when it is going on, right, that 12 million ton expansion, uh, there are actually millions of instruments here and there, okay? Now the first thing is, I'll not get deep into that because then it's a different story, but the point is, um, you need to know that each of the role of each of the instruments of making that particular process successful or not, right? Now, and this means that that particular equipment has to behave in a specific way, correct? um, it is a very simple thing, but the point is this is what it is. There was a crane, okay? There was a crane at a height of around 45 meter. 45 meter is pretty high, right? Up in the sky. And then it used to leave a very critical uh, equipment, okay? And lower, lift and lower. I will not say crane. I will say that this entire thing is a kind of, this is an arrangement, okay, that which actually lowers and takes it up. And the controls of that is in millimeters. So which means that a very large piece of thing which used to move millimeter by millimeter. So therefore, you can understand the role of the brake. The brake has to be so efficient that the moment I say stop, it stops. No slippage, no overrun, no kind of, it cannot just also do it beforehand. Because the entire quality of steel depends on the position of the lance. And it was lifting the lance or lowering the lance. And the supersonic jet of oxygen has to basically pass through that particular lance. Now, and this is water cooled. If it goes little bit deep, then the tip touches steel and then it melts. And then if it melts, it's a disaster because it's then hundred of dynamites kind of exploding in one go. And then it will rupture the entire plant.
Oh.
Okay. This is so dangerous. And it cannot also go up or lose controls, because then what happens is your steel what you are kind of making maybe around 3 to 4 million per hit, you are losing that. So the cost is enormous. You can understand, right? It is small simple break, one break, right? But the function of that break is so critical. I used to go set this break myself. Uh, in fact, in that plant, that 1 million ton expansion, most of the instrumentation and equipment, I had a direct role to kind of install it. Now, um, later, after the commissioning, when it is running, I was still there for about 3 months till the plant stabilized. I used to take one or two people with me, 40 meters up. And then I used to teach them that, this is how you should exactly set the brake and check the brake because it is so critical. I have heard this from my superiors as well as some of the juniors. Why Mandal sab goes at 40 meters with these junior guys? उसको भेज काहे नहीं देता? This is what the difference is. Because that is one single most important thing. If it happens, anything, if it goes wrong, the price for failure is extremely, extremely. Somebody needs to understand that. Okay. And later on, after 6, 8 months, I told the same guys who used to say that. Because it never directly used to come to me, but through Maya. I told them point blank that this is why I used to take that. Today, that guy, I can send him without a doubt that you go and set the brake because I know that he's going to set and follow what he has seen and practice. So this is what is, I think, very, very important, extremely important. And this is what is a project. The same thing is in project. The project is so different. So industrial project is very different because there you got to work with different kind of skill levels. The skill level in the IT is completely different. They have never seen industry. They have never seen industry. They just cannot imagine what happens within an industry. Therefore, they cannot also imagine that if I put a particular tab not in the left side or on the right hand side, what is the implications? They will never understand this. So that is where possibly some people are required to really understand that what happens, what is their expectations. And but here in IT, you are handling intelligent people, well educated people. So you cannot give galis, right? You have to be very polite at times. Difficult for me most of the times, but the point is, yes, you have to be very polite and say that okay, you are not doing possibly the right thing, right? So handling this kind of crowd, and there will be, I mean, people with skill but not with lot of education. If something had to be told or said, they will just go and they will just say on the face of the supervisor that नहीं sir ऐसे नहीं होता है आप जो समझ रहे हैं ना ऐसे नहीं होता है वो this is how it has to be done. It is not the same case in with the when you are dealing with the educated guys. They will never say this kind of words also to you, but they will also not do. So it is difficult. It is pretty different handling both side of crowds. And there on the industrial front, there are unions. You need to understand, right? So union, whoever is unionized, right? They are different. They are different in the sense that they're human beings, obviously. So they behave like human only. But only point is, since they have an umbrella, um, you need to understand that what is your limit, right? And what you can say. Uh, on the other hand, the white collar job, not much of really union out there. So therefore, you can fire, you can do a lot of things here, which is possible. If you don't kind of say that this guy is not good, you'll possibly look at replacements, right? In industrial front, you cannot possibly also look for replacements, but you will possibly need to see that an expert comes and teaches and kind of set this right, and kind of people learn from them. So there is a different approach, when you really handle different projects.
Okay, okay. Well, Bibartak, thankfully I've only seen your polite side. So
No, no, no. You are right. You are right. Yeah. Again, so we were in a software industry
yeah,
now,
yeah, yeah.
so you have seen that.
Yeah, so we've
And
had a
also
very
possibly you have. Tell me.
I said we've
Sorry.
had a very long discussion. So before I see your other side, I
Hmm.
would say very thanks a lot for taking the time, and you very politely again explained a lot of concepts, lot of experience sharing, and I think I have personally learned a lot. And like I'm conducting a course on software project management at IIM Indore. And I'm sure the students would gain a lot from the insights that you share. Anything specific that you want to advise to the students of project management, and if they're looking for a career in this area, what are the various capabilities that they should look at building? What should they how should they plan if they're looking for
Hmm.
project management as a role?
See, I mean, again, you have by this time, I think we understand that there are projects. There are difference of different kind of projects, and there is size difference, complexity difference, um, because of the industry is different, the projects may be kind of different. Now, the people are from different streams, so I do not know who will go into what kind of projects. But the point is, wherever you go, I mean, there is a project management institute. I think people have heard of, right? Now, uh, I mean, there are some pillars project management. So my advice would be that one of the pillar is time, right? One of the pillar is your effort and cost. The other is kind of quality, right? Um, the point is underlying things. Everything is guided by scope. One need to really understand the scope very, very well, okay, for the project. If it is small or big, if you understand the project scope well, then you start thinking the project in a different way. Uh, the moment you start think the project in a different way, you will start thinking in terms of what is your customer, would they have different expectation out of it, um, how you like to kind of, is it only a technical project or it is techno-functional project? If there is a techno-functional project, do we need to have someone who is functionally rich in this area? Do we need to take help of outside help from organization or from the outside the team? So I think project management is thinking just beyond the scope of the work, because the scope of the work is to contain the work within that. But to even contain that particular work, what we need to have is the environment around it, a good understanding of the environment, and good understanding of what do I require to perform or kind of execute this particular scope of the project. And that is the first thing to start with. If you have a good understanding of that, then my advice would be plan it well. Plan it very well. The most granular plan will give you lots of visibility. Lots of visibility. You start questioning the plan. You may plan, somebody else may plan, but the point is you must have the capability or you must adopt a skill to kind of start questioning the plan. That why not this? When this is going to happen? What is the critical path? What is that if you do not get is going, I mean, next set of jobs will kind of stop. So you got to be in a position and see ahead of the rest of the guys that where are the bottlenecks coming, and start planning for that. Your job is not to work along with the people the work they are doing. Your work as a project manager is to look at the different bottlenecks all around the project and to ensure you have the right resources at right time to debottleneck those areas so that the project runs smoothly and kind of these three pillars have been achieved through your project. Otherwise it doesn't make sense. The project maybe you can finish it within time, but it is costly. But what is the point? The customer will say, you have eaten my whatever I had revenue I had planned for, right? And then if it is not in time, then somebody will say, oh, okay, we have missed the bus. You are champion, I mean, your software is working good, but I don't need you. Okay. And again, the quality and scope, quality will basically be derived from again the scope. The point is, if you don't satisfy that, then what you guys are doing for such a long time, right? It's an entire wastage, right? So um, these are all related. And my advice is keep your ears and eyes open to see, imagine, be imaginative. Um, if you are coming from a little functional or technical background, nurture that parallelly because that is very important. I feel that I should have been technologically more sound. It would have helped me at some point of time. Although I'm not right now, I think that possibly it's okay. Uh, but the point is, why should the look at this? Project managers are also very, very vulnerable in the industry. What do I do as a project manager? Organization, if he finds, this guy is not really performing, but I need the technical guys to be there to perform and functional guys to be there, they can throw me off anytime, isn't it? So even for my survival also, I need to have at least gather one skill, either technical or functional or techno-functional, in such a way that in that particular domain, wherever we are working, um, we have a say as a project manager, and that is given valued, and people see value in whatever you are saying. As long as you can deliver that value and deliver the project successfully within those three parameters, um, I think you are a good project manager.
Hmm. Well, Bibartak, great talking to you and
Hmm.
very wonderful insight shared. It's always a pleasure listening to you. Thanks a lot, and thanks for patiently explaining all the concepts and all your sharing all your experiences. It's a really wonderful experience. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I am, is most welcome because I fully believe that people needs to share their experiences,
Right.
and we learn from experiences. Learning from experiences is always good than just reading. Reading gives you something, some insight. But learning from experience is possibly very good. And if you can even take 3-4% of whatever you have heard and apply it, that is possibly very, very good.
Certainly.
And thank you for giving me this opportunity because it's always nice to talk to the students and nice to talk to you. So you know that.
Certainly. Certainly.
So thank you.
Thanks, Bibartak. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye bye.
See you then.